Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss the design of fiscal incentives or fiscal incentives design and how best to go about it. Now, in terms of a special economic zone, and we know that the names vary around the world from free zones to enterprise zones, export processing zone, um, foreign trade zone. It's all the same thing basically. Now, no matter what you call it, the objectives of the government that designs it is going to shape how the fiscal incentives and fiscal incentives mean generally speaking, the taxes that the government foregoes, does not collect in order to stimulate investments coming into the country or from locals investing as well. So it could be corporate income tax. You know, your corporate income tax could be at a regular rate of 25%, but you decide to lower it to say 15 or 10 or 0 um, to attract investments into your country or stimulate investments, probably more accurate to say. Now, in terms of designing fiscal incentives, of course, the country, is going to see what exactly are its, what type of investments does it want to attract, where maybe there are special regions within the country that are a bit underdeveloped that it seeks to develop. So it's going to try to attract certain types of investors. So you have to study what exactly is important to these investors. Typically speaking, though, one of the major things is a well-functioning business environment. Now, um, that side of things, this is why many countries go into special economic zones, because rather than try to reform the economy in one go in order to attract those investors, the special economic zones become that policy lab in order to test out certain things. So, um, with designing the regime, we've seen over the years that there was this drive towards what they call non-fiscal incentives, that's the main thing. And the business environment, a well-functioning facilitatory business environment is a non-fiscal incentive, right? It doesn't require the government to forego any taxes. Now, the the story was, or is, I suppose, that was the way things were going. Data, however, over the years has is not supported that. The recent UNCTAD investment report for this year, 2022, is very revealing, very data rich, and I would encourage you to go look it up. Very, very data rich and very insightful because it shows that, in fact, while non-fiscal incentives were being touted, in the reality, the data showed that was the opposite was true. Governments actually went into more fiscal incentives, either further lowering corporate income taxes or adding um, special, I guess, tax waivers, exemptions on land tax and other types of things, value added tax, import duties, all of the above, right? So governments actually went more into that. Unfortunately, things are radically changing with the OECD's um, base erosion and profit shifting and inclusive framework um, that has radically changed things or has put a bit of a spanner in the works, so to speak, forcing governments to really re-examine one, how their fiscal incentives work now, and also any future fiscal incentives, particularly pertaining to zones, because zones are what they consider preferential regimes. You give preference, of course, naturally, because the folks that are in the rest of the economy don't get those same fiscal incentives. Uh, so the zones are given that special treatment. Special economic zones are special for a reason, right? Now, when designing, this doesn't mean that you can't have fiscal incentives. It just means that you have to modify them. One of the modifications explored or suggested, I guess recommended in the UNCTAD report, is to design your regime or around performance. So the investors basically are incentivized for performance, and basics of economics say people respond to incentives, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Another thing that they suggest is making sure that they're time bound, they're not just open ended. They come to an end at a certain time, 10, 20, but it has to be balanced because investors want that stability, and having secure tenure in terms of the incentives allows them to plan and determine where they want to go. Another area that is looked at is and this is directly from the OECD's inclusive framework, base erosion and profit shifting BEPS framework, inclusive framework, and that is of economic substance, meaning that um, you must be truly invested in the country that you're going. You're not just using it as a tax haven, a tax shelter, where you basically have a shelf company or a shell company, um, where you're just shifting profits into it. You're not really employing the locals, so that's not necessarily. In fact, that's a really good thing for locals, and we're seeing around the world where people are shifting, modifying, amending their legislation, their regimes to reflect that. Now, this doesn't come necessarily without consequence, because one of the consequences that potentially we haven't seen it happen yet is that there are bilateral investment treaties that have been signed and that protect investors in a certain way, and also contracts that have been entered into with the government, which basically say, my investment, my incentives are protected, and you can't really change that. Now, governments, of course, are sovereign and can change laws um, if they want. However, as much as that happens, you then potentially, or that's the governments, are at a risk of um, actions being pursued in terms of getting compensated. And that invokes arbitration. I don't want to use lawsuit because technically not really a lawsuit per se, but it can invoke arbitration clauses, and you find that um, in essence, the for want of a better word or term, the government's been taken to court. So we haven't seen that happen yet, but you have to note the risk, right? You have to note the risk. So going forward, in terms of designing your fiscal regimes, you also have to look at the bilateral investment treaties and other things, amongst other things. So if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see me do a specific episode, just leave a comment down below and I'll get right back to you.